For the past couple of years, GAC has been giving us absolutely amazing vehicles. But when it comes to one department, namely exterior design, they're not exactly doing the best out there. When the GAC Empow came out, we absolutely loved that vehicle. But what if you want an Empow, but you want extra ground clearance? Maybe you can try this one right here. This is the 2023 GAC Emkoo in the base trim GE. Let's see if this car is just as good as an Empow. And here it is right here. First, let's explore the exterior design. Now, if you compare this to pretty much every single other GAC products out there, with the exception of the Empow, this just looks so much better. Some people even call this some sort of a jet fighter-like look with all these chrome stripes on the grille, all the shapes that they give you. And if you notice, there's also this large square by the bottom. That's because this car has advanced driver assistance systems, including adaptive cruise control and an auto steer function, which we'll talk about later. Now, if you also consult the brochure of the GAC Emkoo, you'll only get daytime running lights if you get the top-of-the-line GL trim. But even this base trim, it has DRL, so they should probably update the brochure. But anyway, the lighting assembly here, all LEDs, all look absolutely stunning. Go towards the side of the vehicle and you will see the size of this car. Compared to the new Ford Territory, this is slightly longer, but slightly narrower and slightly shorter height-wise, but it still is a pretty large car for its class. This GE trim also gets 18-inch rims. I'm not exactly a big fan of the design. It kind of looks somewhat like hubcaps, but yeah, I can assure you those are legitimate rims. It's also wrapped in Wanli Range Sport tires. So you can imagine, Mom, can we get a Range Rover Sport? We have a Range Rover Sport at home. The Range Rover Sport you have at home, the Wanli Range Sports. Anyway, what I really love about the side of this vehicle are these pop-out door handles. They're just so futuristic, very ultra-modern. But my only complaint with it, as with pretty much every other GAC cars out there, instead of your usual smart keyless entry function, as you move closer towards the vehicle with the key fob inside your pocket, it automatically unlocks. And as you move away, it locks. So this is very convenient if you are bringing a lot of stuff with you, carrying stuff, but I'm not too sure if it's the safest bet when you're in a very crowded area. Anyway, other things right here, they balance out the look with some chrome strips. You have these like faux roof racks on the top, and you also get somewhat of a carbon fiber effect for your wing mirror caps. Now, going towards the rear, and you still share that same very jet fighter-like look. I mean, the spoilers on the top with its like tri-fin design, it looks really good. But what's kind of funny right here, but also in a good way, is the lighting assembly. It looks like what you would get out of the previous generation of cars from Cadillac. Anyway, now, this might look like a regular tailgate, but it's actually some sort of a lift gate style. You see, once you open this tailgate up, it doesn't just end right here by the tail lamps, it goes inside. So this is pretty good on a design standpoint. I mean, it looks pretty good, but it kind of does eat into your cargo room, especially if you have a lot of tall items that you want to put a little bit towards the end of the tailgate. Anyway, in case the space is not enough, don't worry, you do have a false floor, which houses your space saver spare tire, and you can also fold down the rear seat 60/40. Now, let's close this one up, and I just want to point out two things right here. First of all, you only have one reversing light, and it is right here by the center. Kind of odd. You also get a really nice diffuser. But what is even odder is, despite this car having lots of power, which we'll talk about later, they still decided to give you two faux exhaust pipes on either side, or exhaust tips. But don't worry, there are legitimate dual exhaust pipes underneath. I keep talking about how sporty and good this car is, but now let's take a look at the engine that will back up those claims. What you have here is a 1.5-liter turbocharged gasoline engine making 180 horsepower and 270 Newton meters of torque, paired to a 7-speed wet-type dual-clutch transmission. Now, you'll also notice that it has this mega wave power thing on top. We didn't understand what it was when we did a review on the Empow. Now we know. It is some sort of an air-to-water intercooler thing that, while the mechanics are a little bit complicated, all we can say is it makes this engine absolutely amazing, and you'll see that in the drive later on. Anyway, for fuel economy, you can do around 5.9 kilometers per liter, but this is with really heavy EDSA rush hour traffic, and on the highway you can do a respectable 12.1 kilometers per liter. Okay, now inside, we check the door first. Sounds about okay. It's not the best, but it really isn't bad. inside here, you have a very sporty feeling cabin. So your steering wheel, it's sporty. Your seats are definitely sporty with its part leather, part fabric, red stitch, and with huge bolsters. But what I love the most about the interior of the GAC Emkoo is the amount of soft touch materials that they give you. So you look at your dashboard, you look at the middle part of it, you look at even the sides of the center console, which your knees will hit, and even the sides of the doors, they are all covered in pretty good materials. Even your steering wheel, look at it, you get solid leather on the top, perforated leather on the sides. It really is just so good. What I'm not a big fan of in this car is, number one, the instrument cluster. So you have a digital instrument cluster, but on either sides are these like gauges, which the transition between the screen itself and the bezels are kind of weird. But that is all made up for by the center touchscreen right here. So what you can do inside this touchscreen is pretty much everything. You control everything inside the car from this touchscreen right here. You also get wireless Apple CarPlay, but unfortunately no Android Auto. This is also home to your reverse camera, which is pretty accurate, but unfortunately not of the best quality, resolution-wise that is. Also, these air vents, they feel kind of cheap, and I feel like they're gonna get loose after just a couple of years. I mean, now this is a brand new unit with just around 500 kilometers on the odometer and already feeling a little bit loose. But those aside, the rest right here, materials are pretty good. So you have this center faux carbon fiber panel, you have your stop start button, you have your crystal-like electronic shifter, and you also get an electronic parking brake. Now, one thing I do have to touch on though is this is a little bit of a safety concern. You see, the stop start button is only around an inch away from the hazard switch. So as you're driving along, you can't really tell which one you're about to press. You might end up killing your car or literally stopping your car. Moving on, the seats, the bolsterings are just excellent, and I really love how it's part leather and part fabric, because as you turn on your ventilated seats, it really goes through all that fabric quickly, so you really feel all that cooling towards your bum. It's also power adjustable for the driver, only manually adjustable for the passenger side. Other quirks right here, if you look at the brochure, you're gonna see that this model, the GE trim, won't get ambient lighting, but actually it does. But they are so small they pretty much don't count. You can only see it on either sides of this knob looking thing on the middle part of the dashboard. And speaking of that knob thing, you turn this knob on the passenger side to control your temperature. That is just so interesting. And another interesting thing about this car is the door handles. It's a very quirky way of opening it. You simply pull and lift upwards to open your doors. Now for your advanced driver assistance systems, you get your adaptive cruise control. You can even steer itself with traffic jam assistance. You get lane departure warning. You even get auto high beam and all those stuff. You also get 6 airbags inside the Emkoo, despite being the base model trim. Going towards the second row, ingress is pretty good. It's not too high, and the doors do open pretty wide. So if you have some elderly relatives or you want to fit a child seat right here, this is going to be really easy. You also get ISOFIX mounts, by the way. Now, let's check the door. And that sounds pretty good. Now, when you are back here, it simply is a great place to be in. Usually in these subcompact or compact crossover SUVs, you're gonna have a pretty tight space. You know that it's really made for the front passengers only, but not with the GAC Emkoo. You have almost class-leading amounts of space in terms of legroom, headroom, and even the width of it. So you can even stick a third person right here comfortably with the middle seat, as the floor is also completely flat. You unfortunately do not get an armrest right here though, but that is just a minor trade-off because you still do get dual air vents at the back. Some companies only give you one, some companies don't give you any. You also get one USB-A port right here, and you even have a jug holder on the side. Now we drive the GAC Emkoo, and driving this is pretty much just like driving the GAC Empow. You have about the same amount of power, and just stepping on this, aside from getting a little bit of turbo lag, it really goes. I would easily say that this is the best car in its class when it comes to driving dynamics. It's not as sharp as a Coolray when it comes to steering, but everything else, it is just so good. And yet it does all of that and still can give you so much comfort. Now, you would usually expect like a very sporty car to not ride well, but they tuned the suspension inside the Emkoo to be comfortable but also pretty firm and not too rolly when you are pushing this car hard. really the tuning in the Emkoo is just so amazing. The dual clutch transmission also does an incredible job of picking the right gear for you. Every gear shift is just lightning quick. And also for dual clutch transmissions, usually you're gonna have some sort of jerking action in low speeds. Yes, while you still do get it here, it is very minimal. What I find really annoying though is the dual clutch transmission, as you come to a complete stop, it should declutch. And that is the problem right here. You simply cannot bring this car to a complete stop in crawling traffic without feeling slightly jerked forward. The steering in the Emkoo 2, while it doesn't give you too much feedback, you don't really know where the front wheels are, it still is very direct. Where you point it, it will go. Keep it in eco mode or comfort mode, and it is sufficiently light for city use. But when you put it into sport mode, man, it really tightens up and gives you an extra feel of sportiness. What is kind of funny with it though is you can go into your infotainment screen and configure the settings for your eco, comfort, and sport mode. And while the steering segment is just called steer wheel force, nothing wrong with that, for your throttle response, it is called the shadow driver. When it comes to visibility, most of these sportier vehicles will be, quite frankly, downright terrible. But with the Emkoo, despite having that slightly fastback style tailgate, it is pretty good. And I also like how they place your curtain airbags here by the B pillar instead of the A pillar, which lets the Emkoo have slightly thinner A pillars. That way you still retain pretty good visibility out of it. The only issue is that when it is raining, you don't have a rear wiper, so you can't really see too much out the back. But well, only when it's raining. Now I just want to go back and talk about how great the engine is, because as you're driving this along and as you keep flooring it, it does not have a supercharger, but the sound it gives you and that slight exhaust note and air whooshing note that you hear kind of sounds like a supercharger. So you also feel very much supercharged when you drive this car, and you feel like you can do way faster. This car is said to go only up to like 180 plus kilometers per hour, but I promise you, if you push this in the right course, that is, in the right track and not on the street, you should be able to easily do 200 plus kilometers per hour, or at least that's how it feels like. It just has so much torque, it just has so much power. You get both low-end torque and top-end power. The engine is simply amazing. When we first drove the GAC Emkoo and the top-of-the-line GL spec, I noted that most of the wind noise seems to have come from the sunroof, the panoramic sunroof. But since this GE trim doesn't have the sunroof, you kind of hear the noise from elsewhere. Well, you barely hear any wind noise, but there seems to be a very evident amount of tire noise coming in right here. And I really do suspect that it's because of those Wanley Range Sport tires. So if you just want a quieter ride, I think that could easily be remedied by just swapping out these not too good tires for a set of, I don't know, Michelins or Continentals, and you're gonna have an amazing cruiser even for long distances. But possibly one of the coolest things you can do with your GAC Emkoo is to use its adaptive cruise control and traffic jam assistance function. So what this is you have your regular adaptive cruise control, but it will also steer for you even in low city speeds. And when we drove the GAC Empow in the past, which had a similar function, I commented how it can't really do sharper bends when you're on the Skyway or when you're on the expressway, but they somehow probably updated the software with the Emkoo, and it is just so good. This can pretty much already drive itself, aside from you having to kind of just tap the wheel once in a while. Now, all is good with the GAC Emkoo, but one problem I really do find with it, just like in the non-top-of-the-line GAC Empow, it doesn't have paddle shifters. And I know what you're gonna say, okay, you know, paddle shifters, you can simply just shift manually, you don't have to use the paddles themselves. No, I get that. But the problem right here is that even manual mode from your electronic shifter doesn't exist. So if you're driving this car, let's say to Baguio, going up Baguio, okay, that's fine. But how do you go down Baguio without killing your brakes, since you can't engine brake? And maybe in China they don't have too much mountainous roads and hills, but here we really do need that. So I hope that GAC updates the Emkoo, or at least just for the Philippines, gives us paddle shifters or a simple manual mode to make downhill driving just a little bit safer. So now let's answer the question we asked at the start of this video. Is this any good? Is this quite similar to a GAC Empow? Does it have that same fun aspect? Well, I can say it's an absolute yes. This car is simply amazing. Not only is it absolutely fun to drive, it has pretty good materials, it looks really good, it's super spacious, but it's also pretty affordable, at least for its class. You can get this 2023 GAC Emkoo in this GE trim for only 1,298,000 pesos. That is one astounding deal. And all I can say right now is this car right here is simply the best in its class.